Hey guys, and welcome back to Sasquatch Theory. In this episode, I am interviewing Bree from Washington State. She has had a few encounters and numerous interactions with the Bigfoot creatures in an area near Mount St. Helens. Bree is an outdoors woman who just loves to be out in nature and enjoys everything it has to offer. Some of my favorite stories have come out of this area as it has a rich history with Sasquatch activity. Some of the stories I have heard in this area kind of relate to people possibly invading the Bigfoot's personal space, or maybe people irritating them in some possible way. For example, I've heard stories where people have had heavy machinery destroyed with large hominid tracks being found in the area. They just don't like certain areas being tampered with by humans, and they will let people know it. Another example is the Mount St. Helens story, where the eruption in 1980 destroyed the surrounding forest. Many strange stories began to surface from this area later on, where people have reported the U.S. government recovering Sasquatch that were killed or injured from the explosion. We won't go into those, but I think a majority of you have probably heard of them. It just seems to me like they want to be left alone and don't want people messing with their habitat. I know lately in Washington there has been fires and all kinds of homeless people living out in the woods. I wonder how that will affect the Bigfoot. Do you guys think they will live around the people, or do you think they will migrate to a different area or state? I'm sure the missing 411 list will be getting much longer if people don't respect that boundary. I notice most of the people the Sasquatch interact with have a deeper appreciation for nature. They understand people need to use the forest just like animals do. I believe the Sasquatch can become acclimated to certain individuals, causing them to be a little more vocal or noisy, or sometimes even being caught in plain sight. If you're out there enough when this type of activity is occurring, you really have a good chance of seeing a Bigfoot, in my opinion. Anyways, I wanted to say thank you again to my subscribers and all the people that watch my videos. I also wanted to say, if you have had a Bigfoot encounter and want to be on the show, email me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Alright everyone, let's get into this next Bigfoot encounter from the state of Washington. All right, Bree, welcome to Sasquatch Theory, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. If you could you take us back to your encounters and tell us where they occurred and kind of what happened?
Yeah, actually, it started when I was a little girl. My grandfather was a logger in Oregon, and he was a total skeptic. And he saw one when he was logging. He saw it walk, right in front of him. He was on his machine, and it walked across the Forest Service road in like 2 steps. And he was shocked, to say the least. And he would always tell us that story when we were little. So I kind of always grew up knowing about them. And we actually even had a cat with 6 toes that we named Sasquatch. Before I was young, that was when I was really young, and I didn't know what that meant. They told me it meant Bigfoot, but I didn't realize, I didn't connect it to the actual Bigfoot until I got older, and my grandpa would tell me about his stories. And my first experience was in the woods at the back of my house in Brush Prairie, Washington, and we had this big huckleberry bush in, I don't know, maybe 60 feet in the woods, and this little footpath, literally less than a foot wide, like a game trail, that we would race to the huckleberry bush and pick huckleberries. And this thing was old growth, like huge. You couldn't see through it. It was way taller than me, way wider than me. It was the best red huckleberry bush I'd ever seen in my life. So 3 of my sisters, one day we were racing to that bush, and we were going full speed, and as we were getting up to it, that bush started violently shaking like it was going to be uprooted from the ground, and something was making all of these crazy noises, and it scared us so bad. We ran back in the house, locked all the doors. We were freaking out, and our parents thought we were just being hysterical and ridiculous, so they brushed it off. Oh, it was probably a bear. And we were like, yeah, that wasn't a bear. Bears don't make those kind of noises. Um, so that was kind of my first um, experience with what I believe was a Bigfoot. He was usually all the black bears I've ran across, and I've come across a lot in the woods. They run the other way. As soon as they see you or smell you, they just run and take off in the other direction. So that whatever that was, it stood its ground. Um, it did not want us to be near that bush, and it wanted us to leave. Um, so that was kind of my first experience. My first sighting was in 2010, and I was up, um, I, I'll say in between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams. That's about as close as you're going to get for a location. Um, and we were going to a lake, and it was in October. It was maybe a week before Halloween, and we were driving up to this lake. And I had been in the woods all summer, that summer, and it was me and my boyfriend at the time, and we were driving on this Forest Service road. It was a gravel road, and we were kind of up higher, and down below was this gully, and um, it had been logged, but there was like a, I don't know, like half a moon shape around at the edge of it was old growth forest. So just this area had been logged. And I was looking out the window. He was driving my car. And I looked and I thought I saw an elk butt. And I'm like, whoa, that's a huge elk. And there was some young saplings blocking my view that was right up against the side of the gravel road. And there was a clear spot. Well, I looked over and I realized that elk butt was just a tree stump. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was dumb. And so I kind of just following, we were driving really slow because it had been the first snow of the season. We didn't realize it had snowed because we were down below. So the higher we got in elevation, we realized, oh, there's snow on the ground, and it started to snow. So we were driving really slow because it was just my four-door car. It wasn't four-wheel drive or anything. And so I realized that elk butt was a tree stump, and I glanced over to the left, and right where the logged part of the forest met the old growth forest stood this Bigfoot. He was massive. Uh, he was standing next to a tree that I would call like a Christmas tree, like that you would put in your house. So it was probably, the tree was between 8 and 9 feet tall, and this thing was taller than that. Um, I saw every bit of him except for his feet because there was brush on the ground, so I couldn't see his feet. And he was just standing there next to this tree. And it took my breath away. Um, he was ginormous. And I knew they always existed and I believed in them, but and I always wanted to see one. And I actually started crying when I saw it for the first time because I'm like, oh my God, I felt so special. Like I finally get to see one. And I was telling my boyfriend at the time to stop, to slow down. I just saw a Bigfoot. And he's like, oh, whatever. He didn't believe and he wouldn't stop. And so I just kind of watched it until trees obstructed my view and just kind of sat there in silence and awe, like, wow, I really saw one. And this was, I don't know, less than a mile away from the lake that we were going to, and in the general area that I had been all summer. So I was super stoked. And after that, I was hooked. I basically spent that whole summer, um, plus, like, I had a house. I would go home and do laundry, like, for a day or something and get, like, supplies or food and stuff like that. But for the most part, I was camping. I was either camping um, in a like camper van or in a tent. And I stayed up there for about a year, uh, going in the woods, being in the woods, looking for mushrooms, for rocks, for berries. I mean, foraging, taking pictures, just being out in nature. So I started looking. So the second sighting I had was near water. Um, Actually, all of them have been near water for the most part. And I was with my brother and taking him on this. road, a gravel road. It was a Forest Service road in Washington, and we were looking for mushrooms. And I was driving really slow because this road has lots of potholes. So maybe like a couple miles an hour, definitely under 5 miles an hour, because I literally was having to dodge potholes like every few feet, and they were super deep. So out of the left window, my driver's side window, I saw um, a Bigfoot speeding off towards the left. We were going um, straight, and he was going back the way that we had came. And it happened so fast, I slammed on my brakes. My brother saw less of it than I did, but he did see something. And we stopped and just sat there for a minute and was like, should we get out? And we finally decided to get out of the car after a couple of minutes. And we were looking around and found this cross in the ground. It was like a welded metal cross, and it had, I can't remember the lady's name, but it was like a memorial. I don't know if she was buried there or if her ashes were buried there, but it was kind of weird. Well, we were looking at that, and then I looked, and there was some sunlight shining through the woods, and it was shining on this tree that had oyster mushrooms on it. And that is the area where I saw the Bigfoot. And it was a good, I don't know, 50 feet in, probably, at least. And we were kind of more just a little ways off the road. Uh, we were kind of too scared to go back there. But once I saw the mushrooms, I'm like, we have to go back there. So we walk back there, and there was mushrooms on the ground, and they had been picked off of the tree. They weren't broken up in pieces. Now, I know bears eat mushrooms, but bears don't have thumbs, you know? So they were picked off the tree and on the ground. And I had guessed that we spooked it. It was picking mushrooms and we had spooked it. So I'm like, well, sorry, I'm taking your shrooms. I'm sorry. So we're picking these mushrooms, and I had to hoist my brother up on this tree to get these mushrooms. And all of a sudden I had this stench, and I couldn't tell where it was coming from. And my brother could smell it also, and we're trying to figure it out. We kind of started getting scared because I figured maybe it's come back and it wants its mushrooms. But I figured out the smell was coming from the tree. And this was like, I'm not sure what tree, but it was a deciduous tree, and it had smooth bark, so maybe like a birch tree or something. Um, and there was this area on this tree. There was nothing on the bark whatsoever. It was smooth, but it stunk to high heaven. I mean, it was bad. Um, it was, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 inches across and maybe a foot or so tall or in length. This area. And I mean, I was sitting there smelling the tree, like smelling different areas. I had my brother hoisted up in the tree, and I'm asking him to smell, that area of the tree. And he didn't smell that smell anywhere else. And there was like a residue. Um, it wasn't like a slime mold or anything like that. It was kind of like a oily type, I don't know, kind of oily, I guess, like a sheen to it. And I wondered if maybe it had one of its hands on that tree while it was picking mushrooms. I don't know. I don't know if that smell came from him or not, but I know it was a Bigfoot that I saw, you know, racing away from that general area. And then once we saw the mushrooms on the ground, I figured that he was picking the mushrooms, but we ended up getting them all. Um, I have tons more encounters. I don't know how many you want me to tell, but that kind of, I ended up staying in that area um, because there was activity. I mean, there was mushrooms, there was all different kinds of mushrooms, there was berries, there was water. Where the road is, there's a river, and the road runs parallel to this river. And there's a little strip of woods between the river and the road. And then to the right side of the road, it's nothing but forest that goes for miles. Um, and that's where they would come from, is from that right side. And they would cross over the road and go to the river. but they would be on both sides. But that's where they came from, was up there, because it gained in elevation, and it's almost, I mean, I climbed it one time, and it's super steep. There's no trails or anything. You're basically billy goating it up this steep embankment, and then it flattens out a little bit. There's dry creek beds and stuff, but I think that's where they came from, was back up in there, because they wouldn't let us go back. Anytime we would go up there and get far enough in, they would basically um, break branches, push over trees, um, scaring us to death and basically telling us to get out. So we went up there a few times, but the last time we went up there, I had a guy go up ahead of me, and something, it sounded like a tree breaking. The biggest snap crack you could, I mean, it was loud. It scared me. And all of a sudden I see him start running, making a beeline towards me. And I'm asking him, what's wrong? What's wrong? And he's like, nothing, nothing. He's brushing me off. Like, nothing's wrong, you know, um, being kind of a jerk about it. Like, there's nothing going on. What are you talking about? And I'm asking him, well, what was that noise? And he wouldn't tell me. And later, that night, we were sitting around drinking and playing cards, and I had got up to use the bathroom, and I came back and heard him telling the other people that were with us that he didn't know what that was, but he figured it was them telling him to stay away, because he had gone way ahead of me. And we did find a track that day. Um, Basically, once we got up to the top where it flattened out a little bit, we had found a track, and I took a picture of it next to his boot. And I was picking mushrooms. That's why I had stayed a little bit behind, and he had gone farther ahead. And um, I left them a pile of chanterelles on this stump. I usually always leave them things. Um, just my way of saying thank you for letting me take your food. And that was when he had went up farther ahead of me, and then had that tree snap. And I'm talking 5, 6, 7 inch tree is what it sounded like. I mean, it was a sizable tree, and it it sounded like a shotgun. The loudness of it. I mean, it was loud. And we would go up there, but we would stay kind of right on the cliff type area. We wouldn't go any farther back. And
Okay,
in
so real quick, let me do a recap. You've had these sightings and these experiences, and you were drawn to this area because of the berries and mushrooms and the river, and of
Yes.
course the forest. So you're experiencing this activity, and you're realizing that, or you know that there's Bigfoots in there. You've already seen them. You're seeing evidence, and now you're returning back to the area to see what else you can experience. Correct? And it's only happening in this area, right?
Um, I've seen them in other areas, but they really didn't want me in those areas. I mean, it's all in the same general area. I'll tell you, it's in the same county, I should say. Within, I don't know, 20 miles, maybe 20,
Do you
30
wanna
miles.
do you want to say the name of the river, or do you wanna?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's
I
fine.
I'll tell you, it's in Skamania County. That's as
Okay.
that's as far as I'll go. But there's a law in Skamania County that you're not supposed to harass them. So um, I don't know if many people go up there, but I was up there because I had friends that live up there, and that's where I camped. Um,
So
but yeah,
there's an actual law that says you're not supposed to harass the Bigfoot. Is that what you're
yeah,
referring to?
yeah, yeah. It
Okay.
was in the 60s or 70s. I think they made a law for Skamania County. I think Grays Harbor County in Washington also has the law. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a I think they dropped it to a misdemeanor. It's like, I don't know how many days in jail or something, and $1,000 fine or something like that for harassing them or hunting them, or yeah.
So if you go up there and wood knock and do whoops, is that considered harassing?
Um, I don't, I wouldn't think so. but again, I would be up there with a couple of friends. Most of the time I was by myself. Like once I really started getting into it, I would go out before the sun rose, and I wouldn't come back until the sun was setting. I would be out in the woods all day. And so I don't know. I mean, if I would assume if you had a whole group of people going out with the sole purpose of wanting to find Bigfoot and somebody got word of that, I think they might, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I find your story frighteningly similar to mine. You were on a road, a forested road, and you saw them both times near the road, correct?
Yes.
And there's water near the area. And
Yes.
I find it interesting because I was out there doing the same thing. I was looking for mushrooms, chanterelles, or chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, anything that was edible and growing at the time. And I just wanted to be out there enjoying nature. Well,
Yep.
after I had my sightings, I'd find myself going out there all the time trying to get more and more answers. Well, I still go out there still to this day. And like you said, I'll go out there as soon as the sun comes up and I'll be out there when it goes down.
Yep.
So you're the first person that I've heard that does the same thing that I do and takes the same approach. And I think that's important for people to realize that you have to go out there and kind of be connected with nature and be doing something other than just trying to find Bigfoot, with a camera and all this gear. It takes a lot more than that.
Yes. Yeah. Like I had some Bigfoot researchers that I had talked to tell me, you need to get these parabolic mics and you need to get this. And I'm like, dude, I'm broke. Like I'm poor. I don't have money like you do. I don't have a college degree. Like I'm just a normal
Mm.
person. And because at first I really was trying to prove it to people. I was hell bent on showing them like, look, these are real, because people were making fun of me so bad. And I could, like, I'm an awesome storyteller and I get very like emotive, or I don't know what word you would use. So I think some people have told me that that kind of makes me not credible in their eyes, but I'm just excited about it. So when I get excited about something, you're gonna know it, I can't hide my emotions like that. And so people were making fun of me, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna prove it to you. Well, I only had a cell phone. I did buy an audio recorder, just like a cheap like Olympus audio recorder, and I tried that, but I would never get anything. It wasn't until I basically said to myself, you know what? It's not going to work. I know they're here. Um, I'm just going to be out in nature and enjoy myself, because it got to the point where I don't know, it got stressful trying and failing. And I
Oh yeah.
was forgetting that I'm in the middle of one of the most beautiful places on this planet,
Hmm.
in these old growth forests that are absolutely majestic and beautiful. And why are you wasting your time doing that when you know they're here? Just be with them. Just be,
Hmm.
And so I started doing it, and I would look for mushrooms every season of the year that I could. Um, Even if it was snowing outside, I would still go out there. I'd borrow my mom's truck or something that had four-wheel drive, and I'd go up there. We went up shooting one time with my dad, and there was snow on the ground. We could only get so far, but just being up there um, is magical. And it's even better when they're actually there. I mean, it got to the point where I liken it to uh, the Western lowland gorillas. They kind of just sit around all day eating and chilling. Like they're just chillaxing in the forest or the jungle or whatever and eating. And they might get up and walk to a different area or whatever, but for the most part, that's what they do. And in my experience, it was always by this one area I'm talking about. The water was a couple 100 feet away. Um, and they liked that area. There was enough cover so they could conceal themselves. They could get to water. Um, there was plenty of food, be it berries. There was a couple of wild nut trees, um, mushrooms, of course. So I just kind of would go out and take pictures of flowers and pick nettles or whatever it was that I was picking. I'm also a rock hound, so I would look for rocks by the river. They would throw rocks in the river at me. Not at me. They would never hit me. Um, but I could hear them around. I could hear them moving around. I could hear them making noise. In fact, one time I heard them talking like the Sierra sounds. And at the time, I did not know what the Sierra sounds were. Um, but I was up there with my brother and his friend, and the river was really high. It was in the springtime, and so it was really loud. And I hear it reminds me of if you know the noise that you get when you're at like a baseball game, but you're listening to it on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the roar of the crowd type thing. That's kind of what it sounded like out there because the river was so high. And I do realize that acoustics get weird um, out there, but I was hearing this talking. And I thought, well, maybe there's guys in the woods, like loggers or something, because at the end of this one Forest Service road, it eventually turned into pavement and they were doing construction on the pavement. And so I thought, well, maybe it was them. Well, but they were walking through the woods and they were making a lot of noise, like crashing through the woods, like a herd of elk would do. Um, and I was standing there, my brother and his friend were closer to it. I was over by my car on the gravel road, and they were on the right side of that road. And they were coming towards that road. And all of a sudden, they stopped. I think they heard us, um, or at least heard my brother. And they made this, it's hard to explain. It's like a buck snort, but way bigger, but it was an exhaling. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever seen bears when they go up on their hind legs and they pound their front legs on the ground and they
Mm-hmm.
huff. That's
Yeah.
what it reminded me of. So at first I'm like, oh crap, it's a bear and he's mad.
Let me
But
ask you real quick. Was
yeah,
it like a grunt, kind of like a deer, and then the exhale? Is that how it
no,
went
it was
down?
all at the same time,
Okay.
which was weird to me. Like I can't replicate it. I don't I like it's at first I thought, oh, it was an elk because of the noise. I thought, okay, there and had herds of elk come from the right side of that road when I was picking mushrooms and cross that road going towards the river before. Um, I've been snorted at by an elk. I've been screamed at by deers. I've been screamed at by elks. I've seen bears. I've heard bears vocalize. There is a mountain lion in that area that I saw 2 years in a row. He comes and makes the same like loop into this one campground after the campground closes for the season. And like clockwork, he was there making noises. I even got to hear him purr, which up until then, I didn't really think about mountain lions purring. I mean, I've heard animal noises in the woods. I've seen them. This was not that. It and but I'm. It happened so fast. All these things were going through my head. Okay, it's elk. The elk snorted. No, it's a bear because he's pounded the ground. But the pounding after the first pound, there was more pounds that came like really fast, and it reminded me of when gorillas beat their chests, but it wasn't that noise. It was a little bit different. So I felt the ground. Hey, I was a good, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 feet away ish, maybe. I'm not all that good with distance, but it wasn't too far away and I felt the ground shake when
Mm-hmm.
it was pounding. And my brother and his friend heard it. They, twisted their necks around to look at me. Their jaws were dropped and their eyes were wide. And I just made a motion like, get over here now with my hand and my finger pointing to the ground, like, get over here now. So because they were the closest to this noise. So they come over, we all get in my car and we just sit there and we're like, what, talking about it, like, what was that? What was that? And I'm like, I don't know. I think it might have been a bear, but I'm not sure. And every time these experiences would happen to me, I was growled at. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But I would go online and look at animal noises, listen to them, to their vocalizations, even animals that I knew that weren't in our country, like that were only in Africa or Australia or, wherever. Um, and I could never find anything specific. But we never saw them, but I heard them, and it was like they were speaking. It was almost like gibberish and mumbling at the same time, but it sounded like a language, but it didn't sound like a language that I had ever heard of. And it was so fast, and there was at least two of them, and they were talking back and forth like you would if me and you were walking through the woods having a conversation, is what it sounded like. But they were louder, of course. They weren't trying to be loud, like they weren't talking with their voices raised. That was like their normal voices. It was just like a casual conversation until they realized that we were there, and then they started huffing and puffing and pounding. I don't know if they were pounding the ground, if they were beating their chests, what they were doing, but they made it clear to us, get away. And we got in our car. um
Hmm.
that was really scary. um but we
So
never saw
the
them.
the whole time you can't see them. They're like right at the edge of the woods where you can't see any further, correct? They're getting like right at that line.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I have seen them.
Hmm.
Um, like the more I got used to them, or I should say, the more that they got used to me being out there, because like I said, I would be out there every single day, all day. Um, I might go into town to the store to get something, but I'd come right back. Uh,
But
they
I
start,
mean, in that area when they're pushing down trees and doing the thumping sounds, like you
yeah,
can't.
they're right on at the tree line, but you can't see them.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, they might be within 30, 50 feet, somewhere there within the tree line, but they're so big and they're so loud, it seems like they're right there,
Mm.
is what it
And
sounds like.
have you tried to walk to that spot after they do it?
I have actually, and it's so thick, like the area, there's lots of vine maples, there's lots of Oregon grape, there's ferns, there's lots of stuff on the ground, so it's impossible. I mean, we would see indentations, but nothing besides, I mean, I have found a few tracks, but those were like the one track up on the cliff to the right side of that road, it was a mossy area. And so there was an indentation, um, a footprint shaped indentation in the moss. But I kind of, I mostly look at the trees and the branches. As much as I look at the ground for rocks and mushrooms and stuff, I've only ever seen a few actual footprints. The most I would see was from the trees. They will braid the trees. Um, Young saplings, deciduous trees, they will braid. It's like they bring them all together at the top, and they braid them and weave them at the top. I don't know how they do it, but it's awesome. And of course, the area around it is flattened down, but you couldn't tell if it was actually from people walking or if deer or something else was bedded down right there, because the brush is just so thick, you know?
Hmm.
But yeah, it would always be, I would say, yeah, like maybe 100 feet at most away from the tree line, where
Yeah.
the visual um evidence.
Now they do get closer to than that, but you mentioned earlier that you just don't realize it when they're getting that close. Sometimes they pop in and out, and it's like when you got your back turned or when you're not looking. But if you take photos around you,
Yes.
you'll see more than what you saw with the naked eye.
Yes, they are, like, I joke and say that they're like forest ninjas because you could have one 2 feet away from you and not even know it if you're in thick brush. Like, it's at first that idea terrified me, because every time I would have like a really close encounter, I would say, I'm never going into the woods again. I'm so stupid for being out here by myself. Um, and then of course I'd get over it, because it is when you actually see them, it's terrifying because you don't know what you're looking at. Um, and they're so big that you don't know what they're going to do. Like, if they wanted to kill you, they could be to you within a split second and you'd be dead. So that idea terrified me a lot. But if you stop and think, like, especially for me, with all the encounters that I've had, they obviously don't want to kill me because otherwise I would be dead already. You know what I mean? But they will bluff charge. I've been bluff charged. I've had rocks and sticks thrown at me. I had one growl at me from 30 feet away. I was picking chanterelle. I was squatted down on the ground picking chanterelles on this little like dirt mound. And the wood line was to the back of me about 30 feet away. And I was there for 15, 20 minutes picking mushrooms with my back turned, singing and humming to myself and just having fun. And I get up, I turn around and I'm looking at the tree line and I'm like, I'm gonna go in right there and go look and see if there's any more mushrooms. So I start making a beeline for this area that I'm looking at. I took not even 3 steps, and this thing growled at me so loud. My knees buckled. I started to black out. The sound reverberated through my whole body. Like it's like if you've ever been to a concert and you're like right by the speakers and the bass from the speakers just goes through your whole body.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like what it felt like. It was
Okay.
so loud. It scared a grouse out of the trees from like, I don't know, it was like maybe 5, 6 feet up, and it flew out of the trees, scared me to death. But this thing, um, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. I stood there. At first, I thought it was a mountain lion. And I'm like thinking, Tambry, you're so dumb for being in this place. Just get out. I walked backwards all the way down. It was like an old Forest Service cut that they stopped making the road, so it was all overgrown. I walked backward and it was uphill. So I walked backwards all the way downhill to the paved Forest Service road and then down the hill from there backwards down to where I had parked my car. And because I thought for sure something was going to, come out and eat me. Um, and I sat there forever in my car freaking out. And that's when I looked up online, all the animals, and the only thing that came even close was a western lowland gorilla to the growl. It was so low and guttural, like I don't know, like a crocodile, a lion, a T-Rex, all at the same time, but different. It's hard to explain. It
Mm-hmm.
was loud.
Okay.
Uh,
Now, a key point or a key question I have is, do you feel that they're connected with the chanterelle mushrooms?
oh, definitely. Yeah.
I
You
do too,
could, yeah, you could
specifically.
find them. You can where there's food, water, and shelter, you will find them. But the most important for me is water because they're always by the water. Um,
Yeah.
they're always by the. There's always if you're paying attention. Like I don't know. I sometimes feel weird because I had so many encounters with them, and there's some people that search their whole lives and they never get to see one. And I started wondering, like, is this paranormal? Is like, what's going on? Because why am I having so many experiences? But
Mm-hmm.
I think it is location has a lot to do with it.
It really does.
Because I've never, like, I've experienced paranormal stuff in my life, like scary. I've dabbled in the past. I've dabbled in voodoo and witchcraft and Ouija boards and seances and automatic writing and all that kind of stuff when I was younger. I've seen paranormal apparitions. I've seen orbs. I've seen that kind of stuff. Um, but I've never had any paranormal activity with the Bigfoots.
Right.
It's always been separate.
Unless
Uh,
the Bigfoot are paranormal themselves, then you
we'll
have.
see. And I thought about that too because, like I said, I've seen so many of them. So are they paranormal? And then you get these people that are talking about they can mind speak and they disappear, they come from a UFO. And I'm like, okay, well, I've not experienced that. Okay,
Yeah.
I can't discount those other people's um
And that's my thing
experiences.
is, like you said, you know that spirits are real, you've experienced it, and you know Bigfoot is too, but with the mind speak, it's hard to say, yeah, maybe they did experience it, but how do we know that's not some type of demonic presence messing with them saying, "Yep, I'm Bigfoot and
Exactly.
this is what I am," because they don't I believe if the government really does dabble with bad stuff, and it is connected, it even says in the Bible that, the devil is connected in government, science, and all that. But if that's true, they wouldn't want us to know this either.
Right. And see, and that's funny you say that because I got saved in 2010. So I mean, I used to be really a bad person, like um, a totally different life than the life that I have now. I used to do
Mm.
really bad stuff, so and mess with really bad people. So I got saved in 2010, and in 2010 is when I first saw a Bigfoot. And then I had all these experiences with them. And for a while I was thinking, okay, maybe they are paranormal. And then I thought, like you just said, well, it's probably demons disguising themselves as Bigfoots to mess with the Bigfoot people, because you have to admit, once you've seen them, it kind of takes over your whole life.
Oh
Like
yeah.
there's people that they'll see one and then they will devote the rest of their lives to searching for them.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and they get obsessed with it. Well, to me, not to get like super spiritual or religious or anything, but I am a Christian, and to me, the devil's sole purpose is to lead you away from Christ,
Yeah,
whether you're
that's right.
saved or not. He's not really going to pay attention to the people that don't know God because they're already off doing their own thing. It's the people that know
Are in tune with it.
that can be led astray. Because I
Mhm.
mean, we're going to sin until the day we die. So it's not like we're awesome because we're saved. We're still imperfect people. So we can be led astray by things. So I often wonder, is it, demons that are leading me astray? And I'm like, well, all the encounters I've had with them have not been paranormal. That's not to say that it's still not demons, but it's hard
Okay.
for me to grasp that because they look
Mhm.
they look primate, but they I
They're
see
very real.
the intelligence in them, which
Mhm.
we would equate that to human, because they're way smarter than great apes.
Well,
Like
let me ask you a question, since everything that you're saying is like identical to me, even like your thoughts and theories and just your overall thought process.
uh
Do you feel that maybe with your past and the way you were living, that God revealed these creatures to you to maybe change you and give you something else to look forward in life?
um
Like the Bigfoots came spiritually for a reason, I guess that's a better way to say it. Not just because you randomly came across them in the woods. Like they came at the right time in your life and it affected you to where it changed you either in a positive way or in a negative way.
Actually, yeah, because I'll go ahead and say this. I used to sell drugs for a living, okay? So I hung around gang members, I hung around drug dealers, robbers, killers. Like I was a bad person and I was around a very bad crowd. When I got saved in 2010, I realized I had to stop doing that. Like I can't live like this anymore. I can't dress like this anymore. I can't that be like that anymore. Not because it was the thing to do, because now I'm a Christian, because when I got saved, it was God saving me against my best wishes, if that makes sense. Like it was totally him. It wasn't anything that I did. So, but when you get saved, he kind of opens your eyes and you're like, you realize the folly of your ways and your sin. And you're like, yeah, I can't live like this anymore. So it was,
Okay, so you're realizing your downfall, and are you going out to the forest to kind of get away from that? Use that as
well,
I don't
that's
know.
kind of what happened. I went to, it was oddly enough, one of my clients, for lack of a better word, had been murdered. And his brother asked me to come up to the beach because every 4th of July they would have all their family would get together, they would camp out, they had a beach house, and they would go crabbing and all this stuff, and they're like, please come, he would have wanted you to come. And I'm like, I don't know. Well, I decided to go, and there I met this guy, and I had just gotten out of a really abusive psycho relationship, and I met this girl that I used to go to school with, and there was this guy there, and we kind of hit it off, and he was the one that brought me out to the woods to meet some of his family members, and we were camping and doing all that kind of stuff. And then that kind of didn't work out between us, but I stayed out there. And it was actually with that guy that I had met at the beach. That's when I first saw Bigfoot. And I think that me being out there and staying out there kept me from going back to my old job, if you know what I mean. Like it kept me away from the people that I needed to be away from, and it kept me occupied and I had the money to be able to be out in the woods for a year. You know what I mean? So I do believe that that was God, because I was very when you go from being very, very wealthy to broke, it's very humbling and humiliating, and you can't do the things that you used to do. So um, I had the money to do it. I often wanted to go back to that lifestyle for the money, because I lost all of these things. But I do believe that he kept me from doing that by being in the woods. And had I not seen Bigfoot, I don't think that I would have been out there. As beautiful as it is, and I mean, I grew up in the woods. All my uncles are fishermen and hunters. My dad, like, I grew up like that, camping and fishing, but I had gotten away from it because I moved to the city. And but once I went back into the woods, I realized, gosh, this place is magical and beautiful, and you're away from the hubbub of life, and um,
Hmm.
but if I still wouldn't have been out there as much as I was if I had
So
not seen Bigfoot.
yeah, yeah, that makes complete sense, and that's how it was for me. I didn't really have any money, and I was going out there and just trying to get away from all my problems, and it seemed like the woods was, the best cure for that at the time. And then once I had my experiences, I was hooked. And for me, once I saw them, because I was having strange things happen too, my life was, at its worst point, and I was trying to find a way out. When I did see the Bigfoots, especially the second time, it really confirmed to me. Like, one of my first thoughts when I was looking at it was that God was real, for sure, 100%. Because you have all these people saying, it's not real. Bigfoot's just a big scam. And, you look at past stories, kind of like with Jesus, they said the same thing, even people
Right.
today, it's just a scam, So once you see this, you realize that all those people don't know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
And your
Exactly.
your entire brain just shifts everything. Like the way you look at the news, the media, even doctors when they're trying to prescribe you medications. Like for me, I'm like, I can't trust you. Like I don't care what you're saying. Like
Same, dude. Totally same. And my
all
husband
garbage.
hates it. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to take that pill that has like 50 million side effects just to cure one thing when I'm going to have to take 50 other pills for all the 50 side effects that one pill caused. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
don't get me started on that. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
you have to, once you see them, it is a life-changing experience. You can't
But
go back. You can't
that,
unsee that. You can't forget about it. I know that there's people that do or try to, and there's a lot of people that won't talk about it, but you would be surprised if you just ask people. Like
mhm.
we were in North Carolina. My husband's family is from North Carolina, and we were visiting his granny, and she lives in the Smoky Mountains, like literally on the side of a mountain. And I was in a really small town, and I was asking people, do you have any Bigfoot stories? Have you heard of Bigfoot? And everybody, of course, was kind of looking at me cockeyed, but there was lots of people that were telling me about their experiences. And the same goes for at home in Washington State or Oregon. You will get some people that will be like, "Oh no, I haven't seen them," or "No, I won't talk about it." But more often than not, if you, I don't know, some people don't act right. I think they're kind of fake. And I'm not a fake person. I don't do fake. I call it how it is. I am who I am. And so I think that helps a little bit when asking people, because I'll just flat out go up and ask people. And you would be surprised at the amount of people that have had sightings, especially in the Pacific Northwest, that
Mhm.
you just have to ask. So like for all the people that I don't know, they might be too embarrassed. I really don't have any shame anymore. The older I get, I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what you think about what I wear. I just don't care, you know? So I ask, and knowledge is power. So ask. But yeah, you can't unsee them. You can't forget it. And it makes you want to know what they are. I personally don't know. I tend to think, because I'm a Christian, I don't believe that we evolved from apes. Yeah, we share the same DNA, but we also share the same DNA with a mosquito. So unless it's something biblical like the descendants of Cain or the Nephilim, I I could buy that, but I don't. All the experiences I've had with them tell me that they are an undiscovered primate, but they're highly intelligent. I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'm totally okay with being wrong.
Mm.
There's a lot of Bigfoot people out there that are set in their ways. This is what it is, and I know what I'm talking about, and I that just rubs me the wrong way. I don't.
That's why my name's Sasquatch Theory. Some people get mad. They're like, "Why is it called theory? It's not really a theory. Aren't you saying you know what you saw?" But that's the thing. You have all these people saying it's this, it's that, or we don't know, or it's paranormal. So even if you
Right.
saw them, you don't know where they're coming from, how they're living exactly. Like there's still so many more questions. When you see them, you just have more questions.
Yeah. Like me, they look like apes, but because they walk on two legs, they look human. You can
Hmm.
look in their eyes and you can see that they're intelligent. Like I can look at a gorilla and I can see that he's intelligent, but Bigfoots are on a whole nother level. Like they're way more intelligent than apes. I don't know if they can really talk. I don't know if they really have language or not. I just know what I heard and what I saw.
Hmm.
So I can say, yeah, my opinion based on my experiences is that it's an undiscovered primate that's way more intelligent than apes or chimps.
Hmm.
But then you have these other people that are saying that Bigfoot talked to them and they've seen them coming out of UFOs and they get zapped and all this other stuff. Now, I'm not necessarily discounting those, but I can't really offer an opinion on it because I haven't experienced it.
Hmm.
Some of the people are just whack jobs, in my
Yeah.
opinion, you know.
Yeah. They
But there's
distort the subject.
yeah, but there's other people that are genuine,
Hmm.
sane people, down to earth people that say that they've experienced that stuff. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's the thing is like, I try to be nice to these people that, say it's, they're coming from a UFO or they're Nephilim, but, they tell me exactly how it is. And they got a whole book and they send me pages. This is why they're doing this. This is why you can't do that. But the reality is, they're telling me this is why you don't find any evidence. This is why you don't get any pictures. Well, for one, I'm showing evidence where I'm getting sounds and vocalizations. I'm checking that area and I'm finding huge structures and I'm showing that.
Yeah, I don't. They like the one person I was telling you about that was a Bigfoot researcher that I was asking for advice. They were telling me get parabolic microphones and get all that stuff. And yeah, if you're really serious about it, like you are, then go for it and do all that. Like try. But for me, I'm like, I don't have the money to do that. I don't have the time to do that. Like eventually I'm gonna need to get a job to take care of
Yeah.
myself, now that I'm not doing what I used to do. Um,
Hmm.
and I kind of got in the mind frame of, like, excuse my language, but basically like screw you. I'm not going to prove anything to you because of
Hmm.
your attitude. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've seen them. I know they're real, and
Oh, yeah. I
it's
get
okay
it.
if you don't believe me, but you're asking me, like when I had Facebook, I would post pictures and they're like, we need before and after pictures and this and that. And I'm like, okay. So I think there was one where I actually did go back specifically because they asked to take after pictures.
Hmm.
Um, and
Facebook's
I
the
did.
worst. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like asking a bunch of demons what they think, I'm not
Yes.
saying they are, but just the critical people in there. It's just
Right.
like even if
And
you
then
had a
I'm like,
perfect picture, they're gonna say it's BS.
yeah, because like I have a lot of blob squatch photos. I'm not even gonna lie. And like, but because I've encountered them and I knew that they were there, I know that's what they are. Now, some of them you can't really tell, but there's some where it's like, well, it's shaped like a Bigfoot. And the thing is, they love hiding in the shadows. So like if you get like thick vegetation and there's dark spots because of the shadows, that's where they're going to be. They
Yeah.
are masters at camouflage. They will be in the little nooks and the crannies and the places where you just glance over with your eyes because you think it's just shade. It's dark. It's too dark to see in there. That's where they're going to be.
Yeah, and that's the
So,
thing. Even with blurry pictures, nobody really knows except for the person that took it. They're the ones that experienced it, so it's
right.
hard. It's hard to say. But yeah, I completely understand what you mean by equipment. I make like 10.50 an hour, and it's not even a full time job. But yeah, money's rough, and I
Yeah. And
wanted
that stuff's expensive to
it.
buy.
It really is, and even if you had it all, like to capture something when it happens is hard to do. If you get screamed at, it's like, oh, now I'm going to pull out the parabolic microphone, but it's like nothing else happens. The wood's dead after that. Like you just missed it. So
Yep.
now you go out there to that same spot, let's say for a whole year, and you don't get nothing. I mean, maybe you heard a knock or something and just had little things, but then again, you weren't ready.
Right.
So
There, I
it is
mean,
tough.
it's impossible. It's almost impossible to do. Like audio, I think would be the best bet. Um, audio, but still, there's some skeptics that you will literally have to put a dead Bigfoot in front of them and like rub their nose in it before they would believe. And
Hmm.
that's where I'm like, why do I care about people that I don't know, that don't pay my bills, they aren't even friends with me? Why do I care about it if they believe me or not?
Yeah, only you
Why am
know what
I
you saw, and you shouldn't care what other people think. You know what you
right?
saw, they don't.
Yep. But and I was going to ask you too because I was listening. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched some of it when you were on Daniela's channel with Larry Batson, and he was drawing the one that you saw. And
Mm.
you had mentioned to me that the juvenile one that you saw had a pointed head. Now, how juvenile was it? Like, was it toddler?
Yeah, it was a
Like,
toddler. I used to call him the baby Sasquatch, but then I was like, man, I guess everyone says Juve, so I'll just call him a juvenile. But to me, it looked like a baby because like how tubby he was, and like how babies have like those tubby shoulders and like forearms. That just that
right,
baby look. Even like
right.
when you see like a fawn deer, like they have that bottle nose. Like that's how this thing was, and like its look in its eyes were so innocent. Like if you're looking into like a baby's eyes, it's like
Yes,
that you're not looking into evil. Like this thing is innocent and it's just trying to live out there.
right. And you said that one had a cone-shaped head?
Yeah, it had a cone-shaped head, but it was very gorilla-like. If you saw like a baby gorilla at the zoo, it was exactly like that, except the face. It looked like the baby gorillas off Tarzan. The ones
Yeah,
that go in the camp and tear up everything when nobody's in there, and then when they come back, it's a mess. It looked
yes.
like that, the Rosie O'Donnell one, like the big white eyes, but not necessarily as goofy and cartoony like that. But let me describe it better, like a gorilla looking face, but it had big white eyes and little black pupils. But the skull went up about, I would say, like 2 feet, and it was massive, like the conical shaped head. Like it went up about like 2 feet above its eyes, like above its eyebrows. It was insane.
That's a big baby. Okay. So that because I've seen a baby, what I say, I I kind of equate it to human age because that's the closest thing that I can
Mm.
it's the easiest way to explain it. So the one that I saw, then it must have been like literally like less than 6 months old.
Oh, so it was a baby, like a toddler.
Yeah, because it looked like it does. It looks like a baby it looks like a baby gorilla more than it does a baby chimp.
Yeah,
But now see
yeah.
now
This
I'm
one was like 3 or 4 years old, I would guess, and it was like 4 foot tall.
dang. Okay, so because the one I saw was little, he was probably not even uh maybe 2 feet tall, if that, maybe.
Did you
And
just see him move, or did you have like a face to face with him?
well, I knew that they were there. I was on the same road that I talked about. I knew they were there, and they were on the left side of the road, so I heard them. And I didn't realize this until after I got home because I was taking pictures, but I was picking mushrooms. I heard them. I knew they were there. I figured that's who they were, but I did not act like I realized that they were there, if that makes any sense. I was just going about my business because I wanted them to get closer. And what had happened, I saw a flash of something crossing the road. And it was dark colored but it was really small. And I'm like, that couldn't have been a Bigfoot because it was too small. And I'm, just thinking this in my head. So I'm continuing picking mushrooms and stuff. Well, I heard rustling on the left side of the road, and I was on the left side of the road, but this was like 100 feet down from me. And it was on a part of the road that's a straightaway, so I could see straight down, and I had a full view of both sides of the road.
Mine was in July. What month was this, real quick?
This was in
Was it summertime?
it was like late summer, I
Okay.
think.
Was the baby alone?
No, it was with its mom. But what had happened is they were both on the right side of the road. The baby, being obnoxious, went across the left side of the road, climbed a tree, went to go hang on this branch, and this branch was like 20 feet long, but it was dead. So it broke off and fell, and I heard the crash. And by the time I looked over, I see the last part of the action of the branch actually hitting the ground and this black thing going into the woods. Well, I immediately at that point, because this was closer than it had been, so I just start taking pictures, and I get home. And now granted, I take lots of pictures, like all when I'm out there all throughout the day, I'm taking tons of pictures. And then I go home, and within the next day or so I would look at the pictures, or on my phone if I was staying out there. I didn't see this until it had to have been the winter, because I got home, I put all the pictures from my phone on my computer and was looking through them on my computer screen, and I saw this female. Well, this is what I assume. So I can't say for sure. I have the picture, but I can't say that that's what it is for sure. But this is
Mhm.
what I see. It looks like a gorilla sitting
I
down.
see. I seen one that looks just like that. I'm not
Yeah,
even kidding.
it
And
looks like a gorilla sitting on the forest floor on the right side of the road. And it was a she. And the baby had crossed the road, climbed up, playing, being rambunctious, but she was sitting. It's not like she could walk across. And I got a picture of the baby, but it's so blob squatchy and little. He was like, how little kids, well, especially like little like monkeys, they'll like do like somersaults and like be in all these weird like contorted positions, just like playing around. I got a picture of that. So on the right side of the road is the mom, and on the left side of the road is this baby at the edge of the wood line. And if you blow it up, it looks like a baby chimp or a baby gorilla
mhm.
in a weird position, of course. But I went over there on my way out. When I was driving by, I stopped by there to look to see, was that a tree root? Was it, something else? And there wasn't anything else there.
Yeah, I got to
But
tell you the story because I saw one just like that, and people aren't going to believe me. They're like, "All right, you've seen too many." But at this point, I don't care. I got to tell my stories because they're true.
yeah,
So I'd been going to my spot every morning, all day, every time I could. Well, this was last year, and it was in the middle of the summer, and I'd been sitting in the same spot. I set this area up, and I would just sit there every day and listen to them wood knock and move around and crash down trees, and I would do this all the time. Well, I made the decision that year that I wasn't going to walk around like I did last year because I felt like that just got me less activity. So
right.
I've been sitting there for weeks, maybe even months, just every time just sit there, go there and just sit. Well, one day I was like, oh man, I'm wearing these Croc shoes, and those are the same ones I had when I had my sightings. Mind you, they're super quiet. It's like walking in socks or barefooted out in the forest.
Right.
So I went down this trail and I did what I was doing when I had my encounters. I would take like 2 or 3 quiet steps, as quiet as possible, and just stand there for 5 minutes and listen and observe, and then take another few steps. Well, I did that, and I got about 50 yards down the trail, and I looked to my right, or no, I get down about 50 yards down the trail, and I hear this grunt call, and I got this deer call right now, but it sounded like this, like. and I thought, what the heck, is that a deer? And I looked over, and all I saw was this thing take this huge breath, like it was like loud. But when I saw him, it was early in the morning, so you could see his breath. Like it looked like it was a lot of like fog, or I don't know, you could see its breath. But when he did that, he did the grunt and then that blow, and I looked over at him, and I thought I saw exactly what's in your picture. I mean, it was so quick that it just turned into a blur, and I don't know if it went left or right or just disappeared. I don't know if it
They're
was
so
something
fast.
paranormal. Yeah, it was so fast. There was no noise. It just looked like someone threw sand up in the air. It just disappeared. But I don't know. It
See,
was the weirdest
bears
thing.
bears can run fast. They can outrun humans. These things are faster than bears. Like I've never seen anything like it. Like maybe if I lived in Africa, there might be animals that could compare to the quickness, the speed that they have. But these things are stinking fast. And
Yeah.
that's funny that you say that about the breath. I was mushroom hunting is what I call it, but I was getting chanterelles at nighttime, and I had a spotlight on my head. I was out there all by myself. This was in the same area that I always go in. It's easier because the brush is so dense on the forest floor. It's a lot of times easier at nighttime to just have that spotlight on your head, and because the at least the orange and the white ones, they stand out, so they're easier to see and you can pick quicker. So I that's what I was doing, and I hear exactly what you just described. It was like a grunt and a breath, and
Mm.
I'm thinking that I'm in pitch black, okay, in the woods by myself. There's no other people around, no other cars around. I'm probably a good 5 miles away from my camp, and I'm thinking in my mind, okay, that's a moose. That's a really big moose. And I'm just going along. Da, da, da. Now, looking back, I'm like, Tamber, you're crazy. Like that, why were you out there? But at the time, I had no fear. I wasn't worried about it. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's a moose. That's a big moose. And he was really close by. And I'm like, well, I better go back the other way because I don't want to be by this moose. Now, there's no moose, okay, where I am. In northern Washington, there might be moose, but where I am by Mount St. Helens, there's no moose.
Yeah.
And I've heard elk breathe. I've had them snort at me. Um, I've had them call at me. I've had them charge me. Um, it wasn't an elk, and it wasn't a bear. I mean, this thing's it. The first thing that popped into my head was moose, and I've
Hmm.
seen moose in Montana and Wyoming, and that. So I think that that was a squatch. I think cougars can't make noises that big. I mean, this was massive, massive.
And you're in the same area, correct?
Same area, yep, except for I was on the left side, so I was closest to the river this time.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
it had to have been. There's nothing that makes that noise. And like my husband hunts, we have deer calls. We don't have elk here, but I my uncles hunt, they have elk calls. Like I know all that stuff. I know what that sounds like. I know what bears sound like. I know what cougars, I know what foxes sound like, bobcats, like you name it. Um, I would even look up online noises of animals that I think I already know what they sound like just to make sure, because I'm okay with being wrong. I'm okay with being proven wrong, and sometimes I wanted to be proven wrong
Right.
because I was so terrified. There was one time, my nephew, he was like 12 at the time, and we were watching Finding Bigfoot on TV, and he's like, Auntie Tabby, that's what he calls me. He said, Auntie Tabby, I want to go up and do Bigfoot calls in the woods. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to ask me twice. Like, I don't need an excuse to go into the woods. So we drove up. It was like an hour and 15 minutes away. We drove to my spot, and we got there at like 9:30 at night. And he was scared to roll down his window. And we're driving really slow because, like I said, there's lots of potholes, and I'm not thinking anything is going to happen. Okay, there was not 1% of anything in my mind that I thought, oh, we're going to see a Bigfoot. So we're driving. I had just gotten him to roll down his window because he was being a big scaredy cat. Mind you, we had firearms in the vehicle. We had snacks. We brought like we were loaded and ready to go. But he was still scared. And I'm like, you wanted to come up here and do this. I brought you up here, so roll down your darn window so we can do it. So he rolls down his window. I see a huge pothole. And so I go to the right side of it to dodge it, and I'm almost off the road trying to dodge this pothole. It was huge. Well, I had my high beams on, and it lit up this tree that had moss on it. Well, that caught my eye, so I'm looking at that tree. He's talking to me about something. I don't know what he was talking to me about, and I'm following that tree, just kind of in a daze, I guess, following the tree with my eyes, and I'm following it, and as we're passing it, and so I look out the passenger side window that he had just rolled down, and literally 4 feet away from the passenger side of my car, I see these hairy man legs. And I lost it. I started cussing, and I hadn't cussed in forever. I was dropping F-bombs, yelling, screaming. I started to black out, like to faint again, freaking out, scared the crap out of my nephew. And he's like, what? And I came to, and I'm like, oh, did you see the moss on that tree? I'm like, it scared me. I just made up like some random lame excuse. And he's like, yo, you scared me. Don't do that. I'm like, I'm sorry, Micah. Like, I didn't mean to do that. The whole time I'm thinking, you are so stupid for bringing your little nephew up in the woods at night. You guys are alone. You're away from any kind of civilization. You're dumb. I just kept beating myself, and I knew that I was going to have to at some point turn around and go back the other way. I mean, I was terrified, absolutely terrified, and thinking it literally could have reached out and snatched my nephew out of the car. There wouldn't have been anything that I could have done about it. And that like messed with me for a long time, because it's okay if I go out and put myself in danger, but it was literally 4 feet away from the car. And that, I should say, knowing that is the closest that I have known that I have been to one. And that is what prompted me, like I was telling you about how I would go online to listen to like vocals. I went online and I looked at bears, because I'm like, it had to have been a bear. It had to have been a bear. Well, bears don't have kneecaps. They don't, like, this was literally Bigfoot legs. Like, it looked like hairy man legs, is how I would describe it. And I didn't see the feet, because of course there was a whole bunch of Oregon grape and salal and stuff on the ground. But I saw from, like, I don't know, a little bit above his ankles up to like mid thigh, probably, because the way that the terrain was, is that we were the road that we were on at that point was lower than the ground next to us. So I only saw a little bit. The ground was higher, but it was dark brown hair, maybe, I don't know, a couple inches in length, and I could see the skin underneath. And the skin was like you said, like I was, I've heard it before, but it's always refreshing to hear other people um, say the same things as you. So, like when you were on Daniela's live talking about the skin color, that it was like a charcoal gray color, or like what I would say would be like an ashy gray color, but dark, like a charcoal, ashy charcoal type color with dark hair. And I could see the skin through the hair, and I clearly saw its kneecaps. That wasn't a bear's hind legs. That wasn't a bear's front legs. It was man legs. But because of the size, the thighs, even though I only saw maybe midway up from the knee, halfway up from the knee, the thighs at the time were bigger around than my waist. And at the time, I think I was like a size 13. So I was pretty thick. Like, it was huge, but it still wasn't as huge as the ones that I've seen. So I figured that it was probably like a teenager, maybe, or like a young, maybe like a preteen to teenager, just
Hmm.
based on the size of his thighs. Um, but yeah, that that scared me. I said I was never going in the woods again, and I had nightmares all night. And then I convinced my brother the very next day to go up with me, because it was standing next to a tree. So we went, drove down, and I finally found the tree that it was standing next to. And sure enough, it was all trampled down right there. There was ferns and salal growing right there, and the ferns were all trampled down. So it was obvious that something was standing there. But what it was, obviously, I don't know. Well, I know. I know what I saw. It was hairy man legs. It had to have been a Bigfoot.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, the other encounter you had with a past boyfriend when you guys were driving and he didn't want to stop, could
uh-huh.
you describe the Bigfoot that you saw? I know you said it was over 9 foot tall. What color was it, and can you describe the facial features?
Um, it was dark brown. I have seen black ones, but this one was like a dark brown color. Actually looked a lot like the one that Larry drew for you, except for mine had a more conical head. The hair was longer. The hair was shorter around the face, but the hair on its chest and arms and everywhere else was longer. It looked longer. It could have been dirty. It could have had moss on it. I'm not sure, but it looked like it had a lot longer hair. Um, the, the drawing, it was almost spot on. I was like talking to my phone as I'm watching it because when you were trying to explain the indent in the cheeks, like right below the cheekbone, I
Hmm.
knew exactly what you were talking about because that's exactly what mine looked like. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, no, do this, talking to my phone, like, no, it's like this. I'm like, I know what you're talking about. And it did. It had really defined cheekbones, but it was very sunken in. It kind of reminded me of like some Native American tribes where they just had
Yeah.
the prominent cheekbones,
Yeah. Exactly.
but they're so chiseled. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And then the sunken in that goes vertical. It's like a vertical sinking in.
Yeah.
And mine, because of how far away it was, I couldn't see like super duper details, but I did see the eyes. I didn't see white in the eyes, but I could have also been far away.
Yeah.
The ones that I
When
have seen, even if it's just for a split second, I just see dark. I've never seen any whites in their
mm,
eyes.
the juvenile, it was almost its entire eyes were white. Like this one had like the drawing, the way the eyes were. The
Right,
juvenile's eyes were completely different. They were big and round, and they were dental white. Same with
right.
its teeth. It had like two canines that stuck down from the top, and they were dental white. And I mean, its fur was clean. But yeah, that photo or that drawing that Larry made on Bigfoot Odyssey, I was freaked out once he got to the eyes and it started coming together. I mean, it really brought back a lot of stuff because I did that video like 2 or 3 hours. I don't know. I decided to take it because some lady couldn't do it, and Daniela got a hold of me, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I was like, "Man, this is kind of early because I hadn't been thinking about it."
Right.
But
Yeah,
yeah, the
I've
guy did a
always
great
wanted to
job.
go on and tell people, but I don't want to be on video because I do. Now, granted, I don't live there anymore, but I plan to move back. I just don't want, I don't know. I'm just kind of I think it's from my old life. I'm just kind of paranoid like that. Like I just like to be to myself and like I mind my own business and I just don't but I enjoy sharing my encounters with people, especially like it's so refreshing talking to you because we've had similar experiences and like you said we do have the same opinions on certain things, and that's refreshing to me because I don't care if you were 5 feet away from what, there's still part of your mind that is going to say, did I really see that? Was it
Mhm.
really, is that really what I saw? Could, even if it's just for a split second. So it's refreshing, and it confirms in my mind, like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I saw.
Yeah, I agree, and I really appreciate you and you telling me your story and just the things that line up. That helps me out a lot.
Yeah, and see, like you said about the canines, I've heard them have canines and I've heard them have block teeth like a chimp's.
Mhm. Yeah, they're all completely different. I mean, a lot of them are similar from area to area, but as far as family group members, they're all different individuals.
Yeah. I
Um,
just recently started thinking of like that. Like just like we're all human, we look totally different with different skin tones, different hair, different shaped eyes, and it could be, I mean, you could say the same for them. I just haven't experienced that much of a difference with the ones that I was around. You know what I mean?
hmm Okay, so you're living in Washington at the time, and not to mention this state's like most known for Bigfoot activity. I mean, I'm
Right.
pretty sure it has like the highest number of sightings, if not one of the highest numbers. You have these stories that are being passed down from your family. You know, they're calling things Sasquatch, and you're asking what it is, and not knowing exactly what they're talking about. Um, you also have these laws that are in certain counties in Washington that portray to the protection of these creatures, and not to mention you have all these experiences, and you've found an area that it's rare to find where these things like to hang out from time to time. Um,
Yeah.
what are your plans in the future? Do you plan on returning? Do you want to do more of your own personal research?
Ah,
Where are you going to go from here?
I want to move back home. Like where I live now is ridiculous. I'm on the East Coast. It's absolute rat infested. Just this, I hate this.
It's foreign to you. You're
I
tied
was
in with
born
nature.
Yeah, I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest. And like I've lived in big cities. I lived in Seattle for three and a half years. I've lived in Portland before it went to heck.
I
Um,
lived in Louisville, Colorado, and it's like in the outer city, almost by Boulder in the mountains. But man, I hated it. Just I hated living in the city. It was a
yeah,
wreck.
it sucks. I hate it.
Yeah.
So
And not to say it's a bad place, just I'm like you said, I'm from the country and I enjoy nature and wildlife and just solitude and having my own time.
right. Well, I didn't realize until I started going back out in the woods again in 2010 how much I missed it because I grew up camping, fishing. Like I grew up kind of like a tomboy because all of my mom had nine nine or eight brothers and sisters, and all of them were hunters and fishermen. My dad was a hunter and a fisherman. So that's how I grew up. But then once I got grown and thinking that I knew better. I lived in the city for a long time. And then in 2010, I started going back in the woods and I'm like, this is where I want to be. So I got married and I moved out to the East Coast with plans of moving back at some point, even if it wasn't in Washington State. Um, the way the laws are and the way things are going now in that area is crazy. So I
Mhm.
don't know if I will get to move back there
Yeah.
because
But I
they've lost
mean,
their
like
minds.
if you could move to I don't know, let's say like Kentucky or Idaho and it's all surrounded by forest, you're fine with that.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's actually what we want to do. Somewhere in the woods, in the forest. And like I always say, if I could find a place that is by water, even if I don't have water on my property, it even if it's, 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away, where I can get to it easily, then good. Um yeah, because I'm going back in October for a month and specifically for mushrooms. I might have gauged it too late. It's been years, but we also had wildfires out there, and where the wildfires were, I don't think they got to the specific area that I'm talking about that was like my spot, but it got right up to it, so close to where the fire department was actually setting up in that area to block the fire from coming to that area. So I haven't seen what it looks like. So I don't know. I was so upset when I heard about the fires because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where my squatches are. Like, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? They're probably going to be pushed away, or because of how the area is, they could be pushed across the river. And once you cross at least that specific river, it's not the Columbia, just so you know, it's a smaller river. Um, you get more in towards civilization if you go in a certain direction. So I mean I was kind of okay with that, but at the same time it's like they're so special to me because they literally like let me be around them even though I didn't necessarily I interacted with them every once in a while. Like I could call them in. I called them in one time. I don't know if you've ever seen Renee on Finding Bigfoot when she does that like blood curdling scream call. She never likes to do it, but they always make her do it. Well, did that for the very first time. I was up with my mom, my brother, and my nephew in this spot in this area, and there's actually a camping spot there. It's just someone made it into a camping spot. It's not an actual campground. And they're like, call one in, call one in. And so I did that scream. It was the first time I had ever done a scream like that. And I haven't done a scream like that since because it hurt my throat really bad. Um, but sure enough, I did that scream and they started throwing rocks at us after a couple minutes. And I'm so thankful that my mom and my brother and my nephew were there because my mom and my brother were kind of skeptical about it. So when I would tell them about my stories, they're like, yeah, right, you're just crazy, whatever, you're the crazy Bigfoot lady. But they can't deny that. You know, bears don't throw rocks. They were throwing pebbles at us. They were bluff charging. They were breaking branches. They were making clicking noises with their mouths. I'm not sure how they do it, but it's like a, I don't know, like a tongue clack, but way louder and sounds way better than what I just did. They were making those noises and they were doing that. And they were looking at me like, oh my gosh, you really did it. I'm like, I told you they're here. Like, now do you believe me? Like, they're here. And my brother went still kind of thinking, oh, yeah, right. And so he went in the direction of this noise. And I'm telling him, please don't make light of the situation. Like, I didn't want him to disrespect them because this was like my area. I'm like, don't go in there being a jerk, or because he was like shaking branches and shaking trees, like, oh, kind of making fun of him. And I'm like, don't do that. Like, I won't be mad or be surprised at all if one of them smacks you or throws something at you. Like, don't do that. And he went away for a while. He wasn't answering us when we were calling him. And we didn't know where he went. Well, he had went across the road to the other side of the road and came back and he's like, come here, I want to show you something. And he brings us, we're still at this point on the left side of the road where the river is. And it wasn't maybe 30 feet ish away from where we had been standing in this homemade camp spot. He found a whole bunch of trees that had been braided together at the top. They were all, I'm talking maybe a couple inches in diameter, but they were like 15 plus feet tall. And there was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them that were all brought together, like how you gather flowers, but they were gathered at the very top and they were all woven in where the foliage of the leaves were, all woven in together. And he's like, what did this? I'm like, I told you, like they do that. I don't know how they do it. If they bend them down more towards their height, because at that point, it's a good 15 feet up in the air. So I would assume they would have to gather them all down lower to them, even though they're much taller than us. I don't think we have 15-foot Bigfoots walking around, but I don't know how they do it, but they did it. And they finally believed me. Okay, I think that you're right. I think that there's something going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I can go back there. Well, I am going back there next in October, and I'm going to go back to that same area and see what I can find and spend as much time as I can up there. But if I
Yeah.
do, when I do move back, um, no matter what the area is, I want it to be around woods, and I do plan on going out and exploring
Okay.
and trying to find them.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And let me know what you find when you go out there again.
Oh, I will definitely. I'm going to take lots of pictures too.
Okay. Um, real quick, I wanted to ask your personal opinion on what you think. Since you're a pretty critical person when it comes to analyzing things and you're genuine and you'll tell people how it is, how do you feel about me starting a PayPal? I mean, I already have it, but how does that make you feel personally?
Well, I think it's a case by case basis. This is my personal opinion for me. After talking to you, I don't see any problem with it. Now, I can name a few other people that do it, and I absolutely, it chaps my hide. Like, I cannot stand it
Mm.
because there are people out there that, yes, they're buying the equipment. Yes, they're doing this thing, but it's more self-driven, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
and clout-driven more than, I
No,
guess I
I
should say
agree.
scientific or documentation-driven.
Hmm. Yeah, we won't say any names here, but yeah, I
Yeah.
agree, and I just kind of wanted the listeners to know. that I do plan on using the money for the channel, and I want to get a high-end camera to make documentaries, kind of like Small Town Monsters, or
Right.
kind of the stuff that Mountain Beast Mysteries puts out, just higher quality, because I got some low-end gear, but it's not bad for what I got. I'm also wanting to get a DJI drone to do like overhead shots when I'm doing like the documentaries down there at the current river, because I feel like my videos are really missing that aspect, of just like seeing the area. But yeah,
Right.
what I'm really hoping for is to make like, not, I wouldn't say weekly videos, but when people see my documentaries, the drones being used for that. When I go out and do research videos, it's all going to be used, but it's not going to be like, okay, all this money is going to be used for this one documentary. Like, it's going to be
Right.
something that continues forever. So, like, I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's
I don't.
wrong, or do you think the approach that I'm taking is the right way to go about it?
I think it's the right way. I mean, how else are you going to do it? Unless you, like you said, you only make 10.50 an hour, unless you save up forever to get one camera. Like,
Yeah.
I
And people will
understand.
say, people are like, oh, you got that YouTube channel, but the reality is it only makes so much money. And the money I made, like, I dumped it all, and like all the money I had saved up in my account for those cameras. Well, I guess you guys haven't seen the new documentary, but I got like 7 new cameras, took like over 48 batteries. I had to buy a bunch of SD cards, and I bought a microphone for the GoPro and this attachment that costs like $70, a new case for the attachments, and I mean SD cards. So like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and I just hope people realize that.
Yeah, I like for me personally, when I was thinking about trying to prove it, and just the way that I am now, I'm kind of like ADHD, like squirrel type. Like I jump from thing to thing, and I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm just not that, and especially because I have a chronic illness, it messes with my brain, so I get brain fog a lot. I get really foggy and thinking, and I'm not very technical. So that stuff really doesn't matter to me personally. But for you, you're wanting to do it, you're wanting to put out quality um, information and documentation and whatever. But like there's, I won't name names, but there's some Bigfooters that aren't very, they're known, but they're not like in the cliques, if you know what I mean. Like they're not in the cool kids group, and they are working with what they have. They're just normal people, and I will watch their videos any day over other people that have all the fancy equipment.
Hmm.
Um, but I've also seen, like, just like it is with like the Bigfoot movies. I'll watch a B Bigfoot movie, like a total hokey stupid one, if it's, well, it because it's Bigfoot, number one. But if it's good, there's some Bigfoot movies that I've watched that have a lot of nudity or inappropriate stuff in it, where I'm like, that's just crap. I'm not watching that.
Hmm.
But it depends on the person. So I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with people asking for donations to help for further it, because they want to
Oh yeah.
prove
That.
they exist, or at least document that they exist. Maybe if you're not trying to prove it, you're just wanting to document
Hmm.
how they function in their habitat, or um, for me, it's not a matter of proving, because I already know they exist.
Yeah.
So if I were to do something like that, which it kind of sounds like what you're trying to do, it would be, of course, you're going to prove it in the process. That's part of it, but the main focus of it is just to document them
Yeah.
and
That's
learn,
right.
because you learn the noises they make. Like I've heard them make so many noises. I can't tell you exactly how they're doing it, but I can tell you what it sounds like with the tongue clacks and the mouth pops that they make
Hmm.
when they herd you out of areas if they don't want you in. You'll think that you just have one, and then all of a sudden you're hearing the same noises coming from 5 different areas, and they're all pushing you in a certain direction.
Yeah.
They're using those noises with their mouths.
Hmm.
um, when
And
they
let's
pet
say,
the ground, I don't know what they're using, but they're making noises, and they're doing it for specific reasons. Now that stuff is interesting to me.
right. Yeah, I mean, it'd
Documenting
be
that.
cool to get all that documented. And it may seem like, let's say you just get like the tongue clacking once on audio, and people are like, oh, well, we don't know what that is or what to make of it. It could be anything. But let's say you get that 3 or 4 times on audio and video, and then you get like the sounds of the trees getting pushed over,
a couple times, and you get whoops, and you get a collection of everything. Well, once you look
Right.
at that whole, now it's something, but when it's just one thing isolated on its own, it could easily be dismissed. But yeah, like you said.
Well, and the thing for me is like I used to think like that too. Well, I still think like that, but in my specific area, I would hear like what sounded like a tongue clack noise. Well, it kind of sounds similar to a woodpecker. But usually, I mean, woodpeckers will peck just once, but usually they're pecking in succession, quick succession or whatever, secession, however you say it.
Hmm.
Um, but it still sounds a little bit off, or like when they mimic crows or other animals. It sounds like a crow, but it's just a little bit off or a little bit louder than
Right.
a crow would be. And so I would do that too. But yeah, when you have, A, B, C, D, and they're all coming together, and
Hmm.
you know that they're there in the area, then
Yeah.
yeah, and of course you'd want to document that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, in your mind too. Like, you only went to spot A, B, and C, and you found Bigfoot activity, but all these other areas that you've been to, you didn't see these structures or hear that, so you know that those spots are special. Well, then you have all these people saying, "Well, I've been in the woods 1,000 times. Why don't I see them?" You kind of know why when you're in there and you're hearing all those noises and the activity. You know exactly why you're the only one experiencing it because you're in the right spot. They trust you. It's just the perfect area. There's the river, mushrooms. I mean, it's all coming together in your mind, right? But not for the
Well,
skeptics.
I think they have. I don't know how to explain it, but I think they know they can sense who's a threat and who's not a threat. And I think that maybe that's why I had the encounters that I had. One, because I'm a female. I don't care what anybody says, they like females.
Hmm.
They are not threatened by females. Uh,
That's a really good point. Like, if a hunter walked in there going real slow and he had a high-powered rifle, all camo, and he's analyzing everything, looking at everything, these things take notice of that. That is not a good thing. But when
oh yeah,
a female goes in there, no rifle, she's in whatever clothes, probably bright clothes, she's talking loud, and she's looking down at the ground and just focused straight down at the ground. Not what's out there, but you're looking for mushrooms and little things. You're getting on your hands and knees picking these things, and they appreciate that. That's what they do. Now
right.
you're in their natural habitat. Kind of like, I don't know, I've seen people do this and it's kind of weird. They'll just start eating the grass, and like, I don't know what animals are around, but the animals seem to calm down when they're doing that, and they'll just do their natural thing. But
Right.
if you're in there focused on them, they're gonna any animal's gonna know, like, you're looking at me, you're singling them out. So yeah,
Right.
they trust you for sure.
They know what guns are. They've seen hunters kill deer.
Oh
There's
yeah.
there's accounts of hunters killing deer and the Bigfoots take it, or they'll
Yeah.
leave them half of it or a part of it, or you know what I mean? They know when you put your hands up in the air like you would for a cop to show them that you aren't armed, they know
Mhm.
what that means.
Yeah, and
I've,
that doesn't mean they're going to
yeah,
flee and go 40 miles away because there's a hunter in the area with a gun. That just means they're just going to shut down. They're
they're
still
just
going to
going to
be
shut
around
off.
you. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
going to be watching you the whole time and be like, we don't trust you at all.
like
We're not going to give you anything. Nothing.
people don't understand, like, granted I might be a weird special situation because I've had so many encounters and I had a good spot, but I've been to other areas where I've encountered them. There's a lot more than I think people realize.
Oh yeah, like the
um
gorilla was a cryptid, the octopus, the giant octopus was a cryptid, the giant squid was a cryptid, the little people like in Indonesia, that was a cryptid.
uh,
All this has been discovered.
yeah, the Africans were telling tales about gorillas for hundreds of years, and it wasn't until a white man came in there and said, "Oh, yep, they exist."
Yeah, and
Well,
I
I'm
don't even know if
sorry,
that
but you
was.
people that live there 24/7, I think they were discovered in maybe like, I can't remember, the
Not
1800s.
I mean, I think it was later than that. I think it was just like 100 years ago that we actually really
Yeah, maybe
discovered them.
late 1800s, early 1900s. But it's
Hmm.
like they knew they were there. They knew, and these are people that live there.
Yeah,
So
the panda bear was the same story. The
yeah,
people that live there, they're crazy. That's not, they're just making stuff up. But
yeah.
then
There's
now
there's
we
a
got
lot of
them.
there's a lot of them, and there's two, like, I know that the government knows about them. They, like, obviously we're a big logging state, so there's logging going on. But they will take areas where I know for a fact there's Bigfoots there. I've seen them, and they will shut them down. It's areas where people are close by, or they go up to, or they ride their dirt bikes or ATVs or whatever the case may be. I've seen them personally shut down 2 areas where and one of them has a cave. It's on the river, on a river. It has a cave where I've seen them in the cave, and I don't know them though. I never got too close or did anything like super crazy to the ones that weren't in my area, because I don't know who they are, if they're nice, if they're, you know what I mean? So, but they'll shut down those areas and say it's shut down by some no-name company you've never heard of. Now, in Washington State, we have Weyerhaeuser. That's one of the biggest wood companies. They have a lot of land, and they'll open it up for hunters.
There's
but
an
it's private
institution from New York. They own a lot of national forests around the United States. They buy the property and make whatever they want a park there. But
and I was telling my husband, I think one of the reasons why they started the national parks is to, I wouldn't say protect them, because
to give them their area to get away from
exactly
people.
Exactly.
And I mean, that opens up all kinds of cases, you know, where people are like, well, where the heck are the bones? Why, when people dig and build houses, you know, there's no bones? But what if they bury them there in the conservation sites? Because I say that because if you go and dig, see what happens. See what the government will do to you if you go and dig in these areas, even if it's for an arrowhead. I mean, they will freak out on you.
Well, not only that, but I think it was an episode of Monster Quest, maybe, where they took a deer and they staked it down to the ground so it couldn't be ripped away, a dead deer, and they recorded it. And it was like 7 days or less that deer was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the scientists that was on the show or whatever is like, oh, it'll be like a couple weeks. No. Yep. There's predators, there's the forest that, I mean, it just disintegrates, it gets dispersed, and you never see it.
Yeah, I mean, the fossilization process is rare itself to happen. You know, it's super rare. It's got to be at the right place, the right time, just the right conditions. But yeah, as far as the parks, yeah, I do find it strange. You know, they got these rules. You can't be in there after 10. You know, they shut down early, and that's, you know, that's the public's land. And they've turned, at least in Missouri, certain areas they've turned into wildlife management areas, and you can only bow hunt. There are only archery areas.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, so you can go in there at night, but that's like to recover your deer, drag it out, you know, get in and get out. But you can't camp in these areas. There's a lot of areas that are closed off. Nobody can go in there, you know. And
right. Well,
it makes you wonder.
The area that I'm in, there's a couple of homemade camp spots. It is near a campground, a couple campgrounds actually, but they're seasonal campgrounds, so they close in like sometime in September, I think, end of September maybe. And but there's no hunting in the area. The one place where I sent you the picture last night, up by Mount St. Helens, that is in a wildlife management area. Every time I've gone there, well, the two times they've paralleled me in that area. It goes down into a big holler, and it's really super steep. And they were down there making talking noises, but I couldn't understand what it was. And they were being loud enough to where it told me that they wanted me to know that they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were stomping around, they were making weird noises. And I got the picture, and that is one of the instances where I did go back. I don't think I took a picture of it, but I did go back to make sure that wasn't a tree stump, like it wasn't just dead tree stumps, and there wasn't anything there. So I know that whatever it was, I believe it was a Sasquatch. It looks like a Sasquatch. I mean, some people were even going as far as saying you could see the muscle and the hair and there's 3 of them, there's 2 of them, there's the, and I'm like, I don't know about all that. I just know about the main one that I saw. I know that there was more than one, and I know that they wanted me to know that they were there, but they stayed down in that holler, but they were paralleling us and we could hear them clearly. We walked down for like half mile down that road and then walked back. And there's some point where the road just ends and it just ends and there's like a pond, kind of like a marshy pond area back there. And we walked back and it was on the way back when I took that picture. And they followed us the whole time down and back, and they let us know they were there the whole time.
Yeah.
So, but that was a wildlife management area. And so though like national parks, wildlife management areas, or even areas that just say no hunting, even there, like in the area where I'm talking about, there's one person that owns a lot of land and it's all forested. He's sold some of it, but I mean, I'm talking like hundreds, if not thousands of acres of land. And that's where they're going to go. They're going to be in the places where you can't hunt. Now, granted, there's lots of hunters that see them. They basically can go wherever they want. If you think about it, that's their home. They can.
You got to wonder. You got to wonder how many people from the big city the big cities own property out there in Washington and never go out there, 500-acre pieces, and people that are loaded, and they get out there just to camp, fish a couple times a year. Those are the places these things are going to be at, where nobody else is at. Not, I don't know. I mean, it could be so random. They can be anywhere. So that's not for me to say. But
yeah, but in my experiences, it's been in national forests where there's no hunting allowed, or wildlife management areas where there's no hunting allowed. Yeah, I off the top of my head, I can't think of one place where I've seen one that's been in an area where you would hunt. Now, that's just my personal experiences,
Yeah, even if it is random, it all favors the Bigfoot.
Right. And the thicker it is, but I'm telling you, water is key. Water and shelter, but not really shelter, cover, I should say.
Yeah.
So they can, get behind the trees or get in the bushes. Like I've spooked an elk literally 2 feet away from me. I was walking by this bush to get out on this little volcanic little rock jetty thing on this lake to fish. And there was this ginormous bush. It was so thick, and it was literally, I walked right past it, and this ginormous elk hops out of it. And it scared me to death. But I'm thinking, how did you even get in that bush? Like that, like I would think only a rabbit would be able to get in there. And this thing was huge. Its back was almost as tall as me, and I'm like 5'6".
Yeah, only if that elk was humanoid and had others working with it could it have gotten away and not been seen.
Exactly. So like if a huge elk can hide in a bush that I would think no big animal or human for that matter would be able to get in, and it was obviously taking a nap, it was bedded down. Imagine what the Bigfoots can do.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't even see an 800, 1,200-pound elk sitting there, plus, how do you know if a Bigfoot's near you? When you can't hear them, people say they blend in so well and they work together with others. How are you going to know it?
They do. I had one. I went into it was still in Skamania County, but it was in a different area, and I would just go up in the woods and explore. So if I wasn't at my specific spot, I would be driving Forest Service roads purposefully to get lost. Like I didn't know where I was going. I was just driving, to see where the road would take me. I'd get out if I saw a cool area or whatever. And I went to this one area, knowing that there was a creek or a river nearby, but I didn't know exactly where it was. So I pulled off. There was a couple of homemade camp spots there, but it was getting higher in elevation. And I was with my aunt actually at the time. And all of a sudden I got this vibe. I call it a vibe. I don't know what else to call it, but it was this feeling of get out of my house or I'm going to kill you. It's not like something spoke to me and said, get out of my house or I'm going to kill you. But it was just this overwhelming terror of you need to leave right now. You don't belong here. And I was freaking out on the inside, but I didn't want to scare my aunt because she's a big scaredy cat. So I didn't want to upset her. I just was like, there's no water here, let's just go. Because I wanted to be by water. And she's a photographer, so she loves taking pictures and stuff and likes to be by water too. And finally I got her to leave, but it was at the point where I had a knife around my neck in a sheath, and I had my knife out and I had my pepper spray in my hand, and I was armed, but I would never shoot one. Even if they were to come at me and I saw them coming at me and they were going to attack me, I don't think I could do it.
Yeah.
But
Same here.
I was so terrified that I had both of those out, and she didn't notice. I just kept saying, like, we need to go. And I saw footprints on this steep little embankment that was probably 10 feet from the ground up. And there were slides in it, but it was like human slides, like if you were to walk down that embankment, but it was way bigger. Like way bigger than a big man's boots, And I knew that they were there and they wanted us to leave, but I never saw them. I never even heard them. But I knew it was them because they've given me that vibe before, just not as intense, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it. That's one of the things where when you talk about the paranormal stuff, where it's like, well, could that be paranormal, or are they using infrasound, or what is it? Because you literally feel like you're going to be murdered, like brutally murdered any second if you don't leave, is the
Yeah.
easiest way I can explain it. And I felt that feeling before, just not that intense when they don't want me in an area, but it's also been accompanied by the mouth clacks and the clicks, and then I find out there's 5 of them at least, and they're surrounding. I'm going towards an area, and they're coming towards me, where in the direction I'm going, and they're pushing me. Like, I know when I'm being herded, you know what I mean, out of areas. They've done it to me enough times where I know that's what they want. But this was something different, and I've never gone back to that place since because it was so bad. Now I don't know if there was young ones there and they didn't want me around the young ones, or if it was just a rogue male that was just a jerk. I don't know, because the teenage aged ones, or the young ones, I should say, they're kind of, I don't know, like kind of cocky and like rambunctious. So
Yeah.
they're the ones that are going to be more in your face with it. They're going to be the ones that, um, well, in my experience, anyways, I can't speak for anybody else, but in my experiences, they're the ones that do the bluff charges. Um, the older ones are more chill, unless you are by their babies, or if you're getting too close to where they sleep.
Yeah, I agree. I think the juveniles are the ones that interact the most. And once they get older and develop a different sense of maturity, they are a completely different animal. Completely different animal. The mature Sasquatch compared to the juveniles are completely different. And that makes me wonder that many people are probably around Sasquatch when in the woods, but they don't get that interaction. Maybe people
Right.
that find giant structures, those are older groups. But if you can find a group that have young ones, you'll get Sasquatch activity, I
Yep.
believe.
Well, and if you also notice, especially by water, and granted, trees fall in the woods. Okay, everybody knows that. And granted, they fall by the water. But what I noticed in a lot of these areas is that they will, it's like they're making jungle gyms for the kids. It's what it reminds me of. They're putting the trees in such a way that they can either cross the river, or they can climb up to get up to a steep cliff. Um, I don't know. It's hard to explain. Because yeah, trees fall, and they fall all the time. They fall off cliffs. They fall. I realize that, and I get that. But I guess the way that they're positioned is how I should say it. It literally looks like it's a kid's jungle gym. Like, it makes me want to go climb on it, and I don't like climbing things. But it reminds me of like the structures that we would have on the playground as a kid, where like the monkey bars and the slides and the things that you could climb up and go down, and
That's a
you know
good point. Like parents, when they have kids, they go through that stage where they set up, a swing set and, they buy them toys. But what if the older Sasquatches are making these structures so the little ones, have play areas, they like to play? I don't know. Maybe possible.
That's what I mean. I think that it's only under their supervision. I don't, just like how baby deers can lay all day and the mom will leave them and only come back like once a day to feed them or whatever, and they could just lay there and be out of sight and whatever.
To me,
I
it
think,
reminded me of like, when people have a house cat and they buy like that jungle gym for the cat, and it like it
yes,
funnels all the way up and goes to the ceiling, like, and they climb up it and they enjoy it. Like, I don't know, it's just what they
yes,
do. It's in their nature. I kind of got that sense about what we were talking about. The juveniles will run up the big structures and just play in them and hide in them, and I don't know.
yep. Especially when
feel.
it's around water. I'll take notice because the way, I mean, obviously lots of other wild animals will probably use those down trees to cross water or to get up to a steep embankment or a cliff or whatever. But I always take notice, and then I look at like how it's made. Like, where did that tree come from? Did it come from right there at the top of the cliff, and that's why it's sitting down? Like if it's near like a waterfall, like we have lots of waterfalls. Is it because it came off the cliff? Did it get washed down the river during, when in the spring? Did it get washed down? Like, I kind of just take notice of those kind of things, because I don't know, I think that too many people go out in the woods and they're seeing the trees, they're seeing nature, they're being observant, but it's a totally different thing to be observant when you have Bigfoots in mind
Mm.
and you're specifically looking for the certain things. Now, granted, not every tree break is going to be from a Bigfoot. Um, I will joke with my husband, and he hates it because I'm like, "Oh, look at that tree break! A Bigfoot did it!" And I'm totally joking, but I think part of him thinks that I'm serious. Um, I know that not everything is Bigfoot, but once you've seen them, you look at that kind of stuff. You
Mm.
pay attention more to that kind of stuff than somebody that just goes out. Just like how there's people that are really good at seeing deer from distance or
Yeah.
just a slight movement, like hunters especially. They can pick up on that. Um, I got pretty good at knowing when they were around, seeing a flash, seeing especially black or
Mm.
dark. We only have black bears. A black bear, if it knows I'm there, it's not going to stick around. Granted, I know if it's like right when they're going to get ready to hibernate, or if it's a mama with young, they might be more defensive. But for the most part, they run. So they're not going to stay around, in the area knowing that I'm there.
Mm.
And you just kind of you pay attention to certain things, and okay, I see this, 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 and this, and I know that they're around.
Yeah. I completely agree. Okay, Bree. Well, I think we're getting towards the end of the show. But yeah, it was a pleasure having you on the show, and I had a great time.
Me too. Thank you for letting me ramble on for so long, especially when I'm sick with a stuffed up nose, but I appreciate it. I had fun.
Yeah, no problem. And when you get back out to Washington, send me some pictures and let me know what you find.
I definitely will.
All right, Bree. Well, you have a great day, and you take care.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
I found that Bree's activity in Washington was very similar to mine here in the Ozarks. It seems that most activity takes place near some type of major waterway or water source. And of course, where there is water, there is life. When I had my sightings a few years ago, I noticed that there were chanterelle mushrooms growing all over the place around the property. And of course, there was a big creek system nearby. So I wasn't surprised to hear Bree say that she was getting all kinds of activity around the mushrooms. She also mentioned them using the high ground to their advantage. I have noticed they will use the high ground as a vantage point, and I'm sure they can hear better from up there. I also wanted to say thank you for sharing the photos. They were very interesting, and you could definitely see something hiding behind the trees there. Anyways, thank you again, Bree, for telling us your encounters, and I hope to have you back on the show soon. That's all for now, and take care, everyone.